Hello, folks. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good, thank
Doing
you.
pretty well.
Awesome. So thanks so much for joining us today, and our viewers at home. We can't see you, but you can see us, which is a slightly surreal situation. But thanks everyone for joining us. I'm so excited to have this talk back about On the Other Hand, We're Happy by Daf James, who is in fact joining us all the way from Cardiff today. The one perk of all of our work being relegated to a virtual format is that it's easier for folks to join us from UK and Ireland. So we're thrilled to have Daf be part of this. And we are thrilled to have the team behind On the Other Hand, We're Happy join us today. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
I thought what we would first do is go around and have the different artists introduce themselves, share what their role was within this project, and then a little bit of context about who they are as artists, as humans. A few folks are returning. Megan and CJ have worked on readings with us in the past, but there's also some new faces here. So we want to get a chance to meet you all. So let's dive in and start with Megan.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Schumacher, and I directed On the Other Hand, We're Happy. And when I am not directing, I also am a playwright and a dramaturg and a member of the Foundry and Jouska Playworks. So yeah, happy to be here today.
Thanks. And Megan directed the reading of, was it The Children last year?
It was The Children, yes.
Yeah. For those of you who were around for a reading series last year, which was about aging, that was the Lucy Kirkwood play about the nuclear physicists. And yeah, that was a great one. So we're always thrilled to have you back.
Thank you.
Let's move on to CJ.
Good afternoon. My name is CJ Miller. I served as the dramaturg for this production. My pronouns are he, him, his. When not serving as a dramaturg for Inishnua, I am a middle school drama and algebra teacher, and also working as a hip hop dramaturg in other aspects of theater. And this is my second time working with Inishnua. I did Tomcat previously, which was excellent, and I just love the environment that Inishnua sets up and provides. Glad to be here.
Thanks. We're really glad to have you back, CJ.
Thank
CJ
you.
was originally, you were a grad student at Villanova when you came to us via Tomcat, and we have a sort of relationship with Villanova to provide dramaturgs for programs, but they were a little booked this fall because with 4 readings, we needed 4 dramaturgs. So we were really, really excited that CJ was able to join us again for this. So, thanks. Daf.
Hi, yeah, I'm Daf James. I'm here joining you from Cardiff in Wales. I have written On the Other Hand, We're Happy. I work as a playwright and a screenwriter and a composer as well. So I work in both English and in the Welsh language as well. I'm also, I am a dad to 3 adopted children, which will make a lot of sense if you've seen the play.
Amazing. Thanks, Daf. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks
Allison.
for having me as well. You know,
yeah.
I just to say as well, I was saying before, it's always humbling to have anyone kind of read your work. So it's been really thrilling having it read like this in the States. So thank you for doing it and for giving this opportunity for me to talk to you all.
Oh yeah, no, thank you. Allison, do you want to dive in?
Yeah, hi, I'm Allison. I'm an actor in the Philadelphia area. This is my first time with Inishnua though, which is so exciting because who doesn't want to have an accent all the time? But also, yeah, really lovely storytelling. Yeah, super grateful to be here, work with Megan, Donovan, Travoy, and yeah, it's been lovely.
Thanks, Allison. Travoy.
Hey, my name's Travoy Joyner. I am an actor in the Philadelphia area. When I'm not acting, I also serve as a teaching artist. I work for a nonprofit in North Philly called Treehouse Books. So I served as their drama after school teacher person thing, which is really cool. I'm coming to y'all from Baltimore, Maryland. That's where I'm from. And my favorite color is blue.
Great.
Yeah.
I love it. And Donovan.
Hello, my name is Donovan Lockett, she, her. I am an actor, writer, educator in Philly area, originally from New Orleans. Oh, I played Abby Emma, and this is my first time working with Anishinaabe, and it's been just so lovely.
Glad to hear that. Thanks for joining us. So thank you, everyone. So before we dive into questions, just a reminder to our audience that we are opening this up to any audience questions after we have a little bit of a conversation ourselves. You can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and I will see it. Or you can say that you would like to ask your question. We're trying out some new technology today. Interactive Zoom webinar. So if you'd like to ask the question, we can also call on you and make it so that you can unmute your microphone and ask your question. We wouldn't be able to see you, but we can hear your voice. So if you're feeling brave, we encourage that. So just a little context, each year Anishinaabe does a reading series that focuses on an issue and brings together a number of plays that look at that issue or theme from different angles. And this year we're looking at the idea of how different people start families. So this is a range of stories, of experiences, and this is the second play in that series. We're going to function off the assumption that everyone watching has seen the play. But if you have any questions along the way, please do chime in. So I'm going to start with Daph. And I mean, I feel like you've maybe touched on this a little bit when you're talking about your family, but what made you want to write a play about adoption and adopting out of foster care?
Yeah, so you know, since adopting, I mean, it has transformed me as a writer because it feels like it's the only thing I'm writing about at the moment, but that's because it's such an expansive subject. But when it came to this particular play, Payne's Plough commissioned, it was a very specific brief. They commissioned 3 writers at the same time to write plays for a roundabout space, which is a theatre in the round of about 160 seats. And you know, they commissioned the writers before they commissioned the idea, and that was commissioned in February, and we were going into rehearsals in January, and we were going to rehearsals in May. So it's quite a quick turnaround. And I was thinking about all sorts of other ideas to start with, but we had to do it in relationship to the 2 other writers. We knew there were going to be 3 actors. We didn't yet know what the gender of the actors were going to be necessarily, but we'd have to all work together with the same ensemble. And I went through so many different ideas, first of all, and nothing was quite sticking. And then I was talking to Steph O'Driscoll, the director, on the phone, and I was telling her, I'm not going to write I'm not going to write about adoption. That's all I'm doing. And then I just started to tell her about this, you know, the encounter that can happen between the birth parents and the adopters, and that isn't something that happened to us. We weren't given that opportunity. Most of the time, it happens in a situation where the birth parents have made some kind of peace with the fact that it's happening, and and then it's deemed the right thing by social services for all parties involved. And as I was talking this through with Steph, she stopped walking and she'd started crying because I was telling a story in relationship to it in quite in detail, and then I started crying too, and then we both went, well, I think this is probably our play, isn't it? Because you know, we both had such a strong emotional response to it, and I went, why am I resisting this idea? It's something that you need to write about, and it therefore came from the heart, and that's where it came from.
How does this play then sort of compare, if you've written multiple plays about adoption, how does this compare or is similar to those plays?
Well, because I've got another Welsh language play called Tylwyth as well, but that was about a male gay couple adopting, which is my situation here. So, and that was in a way, and that was my other concern about it, because I went, I was writing them simultaneously, and I thought they were gonna just start cross-pollinating and crossing over, but they became 2 very very distinct plays, actually, because and Tulluth was a part 2 to a play that I'd written 10 years ago. So it was following a protagonist 10 years on. Whereas this was specifically really, you know, building towards that encounter with the birth mother, and looking at the kind of I suppose the 2 simultaneous narratives of adoption that were going on simultaneously, and in that way, it's a play as much about class, I think, as it is about adoption, and about the maybe some, you know, presumptions and assumptions that might go around that and circle around that, and I wanted to deconstruct that. So it ended up being a very different play, but I'm currently writing a series for the BBC called Lost Boys and Fairies, which has now ended up being a strange amalgamation of Tulluth and On the Other Hand We're Happy. So it's endless.
You're like a very specific niche now. People are like,
it's endlessly reinventing itself, and but I think, you know, being an adopter, it's blown my mind in terms of, I suppose, the themes it touches upon, because it's not just about parenting. You know, I think everyone has a relationship to it. Everyone's been a child to somebody, you know, or if you're not a parent, you've been a child to someone, you have a relationship with that. But also the kind of you know, now adoption is so much about children generally who are getting adopted, who have lived through some severe trauma. And so processing and writing about all of that touches upon so many themes of what it is to be human, you know, psychology, sociology, you know, social responsibility, all of those massive themes. I think adoption is a kind of a fulcrum around which all of these grand kind of important and crucial themes about what it is to live today circulate.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're talking about On the Other Hand We're Happy specifically, I think you do a really impressive job of kind of informing the audience, right, on like what the process looks like, because I think a lot of people have preconceived notions, or, you know, have seen dramatized versions but don't understand it. Informing, but at no point is it does it become like lecture-y or too clinical, because you're so focused on that human story and the relationships at the heart of it, the many different relationships of it.
Oh, it's lovely to hear you say that. I think that was another thing, and one of the reasons I want to write about it, because it's true, I've never actually, I've not really seen it represented authentically on stage or on TV here in the UK. You know, often it's kind of skirted over, or it's done in a kind of quite a sanitized way. You know, and when I was going through it the first year after we adopted 2 boys at the same time, and they were 5 and 2 years old, and I mean, I still look back at that time. I call it the dark ages, those times, because it was such an onslaught of what is going on. And whilst at the same time, my other voice was going, this is great, I can write about this, you know? So, yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like you're saying, there's an inherent drama in it, isn't there, as a writer, as a maker of stories. Can you explain for me at least where the title came from? I've always sort of wondered about that.
I mean, so it's first of all, it was so I met with quite a few adopters, many of them friends of mine, who had had the opportunity to meet with the birth parents, and one of them told me a story about their little boy, who had once said in the car, said, I'm really worried. I'm really worried about my birth mum. I think she might be sad. And he said and why do you think that? Well, you know, because she had to give me up. That must be really sad. And then his dad says, well, yes, but on the other hand, we're happy. And so he said that, and I'd written that down. And we were coming up with titles for the play, and that was one of the suggestions. And for me, I mean, there's a short dialogue in the play between Tyler and the dad at the end where you go, it's not quite the title, but it suggests the title.
Yeah.
I'm not always a great fan of hearing the title of the text, because it's like, hey, there's the title of the play. But but it's a play on that, where she goes, you know, having a similar conversation, and he says, on the other hand, and then we cut forward into time, and he's singing happy birthday to you. So it's there in the play. But for me, it also reflects a kind of, you know, the idea of one hand it's this and on the other hand it's that. And this play is all about these seemingly oppositional narratives. You know, we have the narrative of Abby and Josh, and you think it's going to be their story, and of course it actually isn't in the end. It is to some extent, but then it kind of there's an upheaval in the center of that. And then but you also then have Kelly and Liam's story as well on the other hand too. And there's that moment in the play where at the beginning Abby and Josh are in the taxi and Abby's shouting out the window and saying, "Get a room," to this couple, and then we learn at the end that that is Liam and Kelly, and that's the night that Tyler was conceived. And this idea of what these seeming oppositional stories, narratives, the way we see the world maybe in binary terms, and actually there's something about, I'm interested in exploring that space between them where these narratives can merge and deconstruct in that seeming oppositional quality. And that's hopefully what the play is about. It's about two sides of an argument, two sides of the same coin, and Tyler is at the center of all of that.
How, in the process of creating the play, you told a little bit about like working with Payne's Plow, but there's these moments where the audience gets drawn in, and they were, part of the reading, even though it was virtual, I think, and I'll talk with you a little bit about this, Megan, like it's a bit of a challenge within this play when you shift it to a virtual format, because it has this sort of asking the audience to participate, both by asking them direct questions, but also making them be characters in a scene, right? For those who are watching at home, in the original script, when Kelly is expecting her social worker is Claire, and it's like they pick a person in the audience and sort of make them that person. So how did that kind of element of the play develop, and why?
I knew from the beginning I probably wanted it to have that element of direct address. It's partly because the roundabout it's a circular structure, so you're not just watching the play, you are watching the audience. There's a real sense of we are here as a temporary community engaging with this play. And because the play for me is about social questions, I wanted that audience to feel like they were going through the process. I wanted them to feel that they were not passively watching but engaged and having to think about things in exactly the same way as we did when we were adopting. And then it was about looking at the most playful ways of doing that, but also, I mean, part of the direct address is it's playful and it's fun. Hopefully it's done quite carefully so that the audience actually, they get warmed up and they can't, and Josh is very kind to them when he starts talking to them, he makes a joke of that. But it really added to the kind of the emotion of watching it live on stage, in quite an extraordinary way. I think, at the end of the play, when Kelly can't speak anymore, and she gives those questions to an audience member to read them out, the emotion that the audience were feeling as they were trying to get the words out were reflecting what Kelly was going. So then you just had, they were just crying, watching each other, trying to get the words. I feel like that participation led to a much more of an emotional investment in the story. So and personally, I always ask, because I write for screen as well, what can theatre do? What does liveness do? Why are we telling it in this form? And what are those things that theatre can do better than anything else? And, using that audience, that we are here together, we are responsible for each other. It's a truly kind of, it's a moment of ritual, really, and a transformative moment of ritual, hopefully, that watching that play together, that audience comes out having experienced something as, as one.
Yeah, I think there's so much of this play is about people, like you were saying, whose lives seem like they aren't connected, sort of being thrown together, even for very brief moments. And there's something really lovely about like asking the audience to experience that as well, being thrown together and not just sort of being in your little observer bubble.
And there's there's really interesting moments where they ask the audience, okay, what would you do and if a child had HIV, or and such an interesting moment, because you can see people going, and then others just go, I don't want my, and it's quite interesting as an adopter watching people doing that choice, because I'm watching going, now, who's being really honest and who's actually not being that honest? Because you can tell, I can watch some people go, you're not being honest with your answer because I saw it in your eye, and it's really interesting that, because there's an element of how we perform to a public and how we perform in private, and I think the roundabout space and theatre deals with that binary in a really interesting way.
Yeah, that's a lot of responsibility to put on an audience, right? We're kind of used to being able to show up and sit in the dark and be like, you can't see me, I'm not here.
Yeah, it's
now you're like making decisions for this child within the context of the play. I could see how that could be really effective. I'm going to shift over to Megan for a little bit then to talk about this specific reading. So Megan, when we first started talking about you directing as part of this series, I sent you a couple plays, and you said you were interested in directing this one, and I was just interested in why.
Yeah, sure. Well, the first reason was because I'm adopted, actually. And so the play spoke to me as somebody who is coming from a world in which, I know people who've adopted and myself being adopted. So it spoke to me in that sense. And then I also was really interested in direct address. And so I really liked that aspect of the play and was curious about how that might work in the virtual world, that I had a funny feeling we would end up, because I know when we first started talking about the play, we weren't really sure quite yet if that was going to be the case.
Yes.
But yeah, so I was also thinking about how would this look in a virtual world, and so those two aspects were what attracted me, in addition to it just being a really lovely play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when I remember there was a sort of email back and forth between you and CJ that I was involved in, and you talked about how the play does such a good job of giving sort of everyone's point of view on the process, right? Like it starts as being about the potential adoptive parents, but you get to see Tyler's experience, you get to see Kelly's experience, you even get to you get to like a social worker, right? And like her experience of navigating this thing as part of her job. And I think that I remember seeing that conversation between you and CJ and being like, that's such a good point, that the play that, Daf, you're able to get at it, that the story from so many different angles.
Yeah, and I often think that folks forget about the parents who are giving up the child for adoption. Those folks are often overlooked, and how challenging that has to be to make that decision, and then that's also something that they're living with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I agree. Talking a little bit about that direct address and the process of transferring the play to a virtual format, you totally reminded me that yes, when we first started having these conversations, we had no idea what this season was going to look like, and so we were saying, maybe we could do something in person, we don't know, and there were all sorts of options. But I was really struck in our conversations early on how quickly you were solving it from a virtual point of view. I think my brain was still very much in like, well, this is theater, it's live, and you were like 10 steps ahead of me on all of it. But I just wanted to ask about like how that sort of worked for you, of taking this piece that's written for being in the same space, and what sort of decisions and process transferred it into a virtual format.
Yeah, well, I had the good fortune of watching some of my plays actually being done virtually, and so both with Josca Playworks and at Villanova Theater, and so I was like, there's so many possibilities, so that sort of opened up the door for me to think about what that might look like, and then so I was trying to figure out, how do I make the audience an actual sort of character? How do I set them apart? And I realized that really that direct address had to be directly to the screen. Therefore, everything else had to be sort of off. And once I had that, I thought that would hopefully work think it does. I mean, in watching it, I felt like when Travoy makes that shift, and all of a sudden is looking at me, watching him, you know, I'm like, ooh. There's this sudden moment where if you had been asleep as an audience member, you are now like, oh, I better be paying attention. It was a lot of fun to sort of think about how this might work in the virtual world, and how I can engage an audience in such a way.
And I really liked, so Michael Long isn't at this talkback, but he is the videographer on this series of readings. He is not here because he is filming the third reading as we speak. But I thought you and Michael and I don't know whose idea this was, but I thought a lot of some of the challenges of shifting between character and time were solved by the use of the sort of space of the, like, I keep thinking of it as like the Brady Bunch boxes, right? Of like where people were in the space. And I feel like it was basically like, it was like Zoom room blocking, right? Like where you put them in relationship to each other was so helpful in the storytelling. There's that moment where each of the characters disappear and Josh is left by himself in his little box. And it's like really effective in a way that, you know, is not the format that it was written, but works within this format. So how did that sort of structure come about?
So Michael and I did talk about that. And so when Donovan, Travoy, and Allison were filming, you know, it was a lot to keep track of because there's a lot of scenes in Daf's play. And so there's a lot of shifting back and forth. And I have to, I give all the credit to Donovan, Allison, and Travoy for keeping track of that. It's like really impressive. And I knew that Michael was going to be able to move their, because they were each had their own camera, that they'd be able to move around. I think that my favorite moment actually was the taxi moment with Kelly and Liam, where Abby's going across the bottom of the screen, telling them to get out the middle of the street. I was like, that is so brilliant. I was so delighted. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, and definitely was something Michael and I had talked about.
That's awesome. I thought it was such a clever use of the, you know, the limitations of the format we're working in. I was like this, and it helped so many times with like my ability to follow the movement of the play, right? Because you don't have the other design elements. You can't even see the actor's full body, things like that. So like it really supported that. So I loved it. I'm gonna loop CJ in now. Hi, CJ.
Hello.
So we actually have a question from the audience that I'm going to start you off with, which is, can you, like, what is a dramaturg and what kind of thing do you do on a project like this?
Yes, so I didn't know what the rules were, so I answered this in this little chat area thing.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, thanks for doing that.
But yeah, I'll just read you my answer. It said, generally speaking, the dramaturg helps the actors gain a more comfortable feel of the text and also helps the audience to understand the world of the play as best as possible. And what I try to do is bridge the gap between the audience and the performance or the production via website, lobby displays, so that you're not really trying to play catch up as little as possible when you're watching something. I think when you're entering a new world or a world that's not yours, there's always some level of things that may go over your head or you may not get because it wasn't necessarily written for you. So my job as dramaturg is to try to make something very specific, like a play like this that was written with a very, very specific voice about a very specific topic on a very specific perspective, and try to broaden that as best as I can for everyone. In this regard, it's such a important message. I will share as Megan and I were discussing. Megan is adopted. I am actually a birth parent. I have a daughter who was adopted, and it wasn't my choice. So when I read this play, it was like, okay, I'm in. Let's tell this story that of these perspectives that are often not told. And it's strange as Daf, thank you for pointing it out, of that it's a topic that doesn't necessarily get told well in many regards, and I feel like maybe it's not told honestly, and I'm not sure why. And other than maybe we're afraid of the whatever the messiness may be or whatever, but it's like this is everybody comes from a family, and we all know that families are messy regardless of how they're put together at times. So it's but they're beautiful. All families are beautiful regardless of how they became a family. So I'm really, really fortunate to be able to help be involved with this play and making it possible. And it was a wonderful thing to be a part of. So thank you.
Can you share a little bit about on this play what that kind of research and conversations were that you were having with actors, Megan, anyone else?
Yes, well, Megan sent over a list of terms to try to help familiarize actors. So because it's a play written from someone who's not from Philly, so
What?
so some of the phrases and things are maybe different. So some research in terms of that. So just so helping actors be able to deliver lines and say things hopefully as best as they were intended to be said. Which was really what was really interesting was Megan wanted me to really point out maybe some of the differences in the process between an adoption here in the UK, and one of the major difference that I found was the cost is much more expensive and pricier in the States, and one reason is because it's just capitalism. There can be so many different agencies involved, and which means that so many more expenses involved. Healthcare becomes an issue depending on the agency. You may have to pay for the expenses of the birth parent. So then it becomes this issue of, well, which demographic of people don't necessarily have healthcare, and what demographic of people can afford to adopt, and what message is it saying that this group of people are the ones who get to have families.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really, for lack of a better word, gross, really digging into the adoption process of America, because there's all these people in place who are working super hard to try to help put families together and find a home for children. And even in situations where everyone is fully well intended, just the system is set up that capitalism just gets in the way and makes things so difficult at times. And then from what I saw in the UK, well, I'll let Daph speak to it if he can, but it seems much more streamlined compared to the years that it can take in the US because of things. But yeah, so some of the differences were just like the systemic issues in America are set up to make putting families together very, very, very difficult. I'm not going to say more difficult than any other country because I've done that direct comparison, but yeah, it just makes the process much more. There's a lot of obstacles that feel like they shouldn't be in the way of finding a home for children.
Yeah, Daph, did you want to chime in at all? I mean, I don't know how much you're aware of the American process.
I'm not really. I mean, I knew it was different, but that it's extraordinary in a way, because I suppose it's what this play touches on class in a certain way, but like in the system and the structures in place in the States, it makes it sound like that definition is pushed even further just
Mm-hmm.
because of the financial responsibilities. I mean, here I mean, most people do it through a lot of people do it through you can either do it through a local authority. We went through an agency. The agency we went through, they end up usually adopting sibling groups or slightly older children, and that's because they're usually children local authorities haven't been able to find homes for. So the local authorities then pay the agencies to then deal with the specific cases. And there are adopters who are happy to go with older children who want to have siblings. We went for a sibling group. But the sad thing is I think, you know, over 80% of people looking to adopt only want one child, where over 80% of the children up for adoptions are parts of sibling groups. So, you know, you do the maths. But but in terms of cost, I mean, does that cost fall on the adopters then? Were you saying? Wow. Yeah, it's so all we have to pay for is for the actual I think for a medical, which isn't very much at all, and then we have to pay for the actual adoption order that gets granted after they've lived with us for about 6 months or so, and then the placement is working. So the costs don't fall on the adopters at all here.
Yeah, I remember learning that through a friend of mine in the UK who was in the process of adopting, and that at that point, I believe she and her partner had essentially just paid for their medical exams, and that was it. And I was like, that is like unfathomable to like Americans, you know, on all sides of the adoption conversation. Like, it's just not anywhere near that.
You know, it's interesting also in terms, because obviously there's the route of surrogacy, and there's a, you know, there's a route of IVF as well, which those things come with costs, you know. So actually they're seen as things that are, you know, that people need money, and it becomes about whoever has money can afford to do these things and go through this process, where adoption seems more democratizing here.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know the costs in the US of adoption. I don't know if anyone else as part of this Zoom or anyone in the audience can speak to it, but I know that it is often discussed as being from the adoptive parents can be prohibitive. Yeah, I do want to also chime in that CJ put a lot of this information into a really, really lovely dramaturgy website. If anyone is interested in taking a look,
I am.
You are? Great. Jess, if you can post, hopefully Jess can post the link for us while we're chatting. Someone's chimed in that it can be upwards of $12,000 from friends who've adopted within the United States.
Wow.
Thank you for
the
chiming
information that I've found. It is not uncommon because of the different way the different agencies report information. It can be kind of hard to find a national average. It is not uncommon at all in the U.S. for friends I've spoken with and research I found for a process from beginning to end to cost anywhere between $40,000 to $60,000 by the time they're done with it all. So it really goes into who can afford that. You're really making it exclusive, and it should be like, hey, here's children who need homes. It shouldn't be like making it like a supreme brand where we're really trying to price it out of, so it's really strange of I think what maybe, because a lot of it I think wasn't the plan when like 100 years ago, or many 100 years ago, but just the values that America has had and created in this way have now here we are. So now here we are, we can't do anything without having 10 different people put their hands in it to get part of the money, as opposed to having like government agencies like, all right, you want it, this is the price of it, we'll fit the bill, you just pay for the medical, like that. So like that seems like a much better approach to it and puts the focus on the family as opposed to the finance. But yeah, I don't know what the fix is, other than from our side as artists, is to keep making sure these stories get told and making the conversation happen.
And I think that's one of the reasons having a dramaturg on even, you know, a reading, which is a very truncated process, especially with the shows that Inishnuwa does, is because, you know, we as an American audience are going in with certain assumptions and notions, right? And often we sometimes can read a play on a first read and go, oh, this is different than it is here. But other times we don't know that until we start diving deeper and having a dramaturg for everything from like, you know, terminology that we don't know, references to popular culture things, to things like, oh wow, we are going into this understanding of what these characters are going through with a very different piece of information than a British, Welsh, you know, an Irish audience might. So Jessica did post the link to your dramaturgy website in the chat, so please do check it out. And another audience member chimed in that they adopted 2 children internationally in the 1990s, and 25 years ago, it cost approximately $17,000 for each adoption. So thank you. That's really helpful context to the folks at home. I'm going to shift a little bit over to our actors now to have a little bit of a conversation with them. And then just a reminder, if anyone else at home has any other questions, we'll open it up for questions after that. So Allison, Donovan, Troy, thanks for hanging out so far, and beautiful work on this piece. We were chatting a little before the conversations, the talkback started, and how really moving I found it watching the play, even knowing the story and having read it. You all did really beautiful work on it. So I think one of the biggest challenges in shifting a play like this to Zoom is that you're kind of limited in your instrument, right? We are not being able to see your whole body in action. You have to you're very limited in the scope of movement. You don't have the design elements to support things in the way that you would in performance. And especially a play like this that moves through time, where each of you are playing more than one character, moves through location. So, and anyone can chime in with an answer, but how did you manage that in making these characters and the story clear?
Yeah, I think that something that's always important when it comes to the art is your voice and how you use your voice and how you navigate your voice. And I think going to your point where, we're physically restricted, it was something about working with the voice in a more focused way for me that helped me bring a distinction to the characters, and pitch variety and all these other different type of things, which I, normally work with as an actor, but it was really heightened here. And it also was really hard, especially now with COVID and walking outside and then having a mask. I often feel that my voice and I'm a chakra type of guy. So my throat chakra is often very clipped and during these times right now. So I found it to be very beneficial to lean into what my voice could do with all that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You have to sort of bump up one element because you're losing a different element. Yeah.
Right.
Allison, Donovan, either of you?
Yeah, I think that's really well put, Troy. Something that I think feels really weird is not having the energy of another person. And that might not be, I think it's a very, how do you know what that means? But when when you're with someone, you feel them and you feel the emotional changes in them through just your body alone. So the reactivity can be so much more authentic. Whereas here it's so much more, I felt, reliant on the text and really just being really present with the text. Felt really helpful. And honestly, being kind of isolated was really beneficial for the characters that I was playing, as Tyler is very alone. And Kelly is absolutely isolated going into this situation where she's terrified, and being alone and terrified are very helpful to one another. So useful emotionally.
Yeah, for me, just kind of echoing what both of y'all just said, because we are limited to this small box, the acting does feel cinematic in a way. So we are scaling it down a lot. And for me, kind of like what Troy was saying, just the idea of changing my voice as one thing that I do have control of in this box felt helpful. So I definitely was trying to play with pitch. And then on the first day of rehearsal, Megan had us kind of present different costume pieces and props to kind of get us into the, I guess, mindset of the characters. So having those small changes really helped.
It's amazing how our brains, in watching it, sort of I know intellectually that each of you was in a different location. I don't even know if you have ever met each other in person. We did a reading, the previous reading we did was 2 actors who had literally never met each other. But in watching it, your brain kind of connects it, and I feel like I actually have to remind myself, like, oh no, Donovan and Travoy are not in the same room together, which I think is a real testament to what you all are able to do. But it's like we want to make that personal connection. We see the conversation happening, and so our brain kind of like fills in the gap in a weird way. But I also think you all did a very nice job with it, which is part of it. And I can't imagine what it is to have a scene partner who you can't see, who is not physically present in the room in any way, shape, or form. And as people who do theater, that is definitely not what we all signed up for when we started pursuing this as a career. Let's be honest.
Not at all.
No. Real humans in the same space together, three-dimensional.
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about then how do you handle, like, especially for Travoy and Allison, like the big, climactic scene between Kelly and Josh. It is such a raw scene. It is so vulnerable. It is so beautiful. And you are each, I don't know, in your living room, in your bedroom, in, I don't know what room in that, in your apartment or house. But how did you make that work, essentially?
Okay, so fun fact, I was in my mom's room recording in all reality. But specifically for that moment, something that was very powerful and like stuck with me was in the one part of the play, Josh was like, whoa, meeting the birth parent, that's crazy. Like, they must be crazy. Like, what you talking about? I'm not trying to do that at all. And there's this resistance that he just brings. And, he has his fears and all the baggage that comes with his life and all that stuff, right? But it was something about the scene where they meet, and it's actually like, wait, this human being like actually connects to me, and we relate in so many different ways. Like, actually, I see myself within this person that I have so much resistance against. So I think it was something in the connection of the human experience, and that really like I held on to, being like, wow, I feel like I'm talking to myself. I feel like this is me. That really helped me during that scene. It was because it was a shock. It blew my mind. It was like, dang, you think it's this one thing and you have your set of things, and then when you get into the situation, it's completely different. And I think that was the beauty of the scene. It was just like, wait, you are me and I am you, and we are all connected. Yeah.
Allison?
Yeah. I think I also just think character for Kelly in that scene, like, I don't think even if I was in the room with Travoy that I maybe could have looked at him for very long. Like, I think she is I think she is just so beyond, like, she built this facade of how she was going to enter. She's going to be like cool and strong, like no worries, all good. And then you see her walls coming down and she can't even ask her questions. I mean, I think, and she's so humorous and so goes to her joke self as kind of a defense, but also like telling a joke in my echoey bedroom is like depressing. And I think she was there. So I think the environment was really beneficial for that scene specifically. It was, I think, a little bit more challenging to be separated when it was like, he and Tyler together and they're like, Dad. I think that is more challenging, but that scene felt really appropriate to not see each other because it was so emotionally charged.
I love the that transition to, like, I feel like it asks so much of you both as actors to go from the Kelly Josh scene, which is so complicated and fraught and beautiful, and then to watching the sort of Tyler Josh relationship bloom and develop and shift over time. And I love, Daph, that you've structured it that way with the same actors in those roles. But yeah, how do you navigate shifting then from this conversation that's so hard for these two characters into watching this, like, and a very different type of relationship to this father-daughter relationship?
Yeah, I think that these are great questions. I think it was all about the the prep for the work that I was like the prep I did before I came to rehearsal. And I think that the searching of my action verbs and the searching of like who is Tyler in my life. I don't have children, but I have a niece and a nephew. So how do I plug in these components of Travoy into Josh to help fuel the play and continue to push it forward? So it was really my action words and my specificity to who these two different people were, and just not being afraid and just having to do it, just knowing that I actually just have to do it, like it actually is my job, and I just have to just be like, hey, we're gonna see what this is. Yeah, go for it.
I feel like that's parenting in a nutshell from my understanding. Right? I'm not a parent, but I feel like you just described it, so perfect.
Thanks.
Yeah. Allison, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. And also like being on the same page as the audience too. I feel like being aware of both the way the story feels like like what's the hope that wants to come after that that Kelly scene. It's like we just get there, and then they have the parking lot scene and Donovan is there, and it's just like we need something that lifts us back. And I think also what Kelly wants is for Tyler to have that really supportive life. So just going in with the transition to me feels really intuitive, because it's like Kelly's wishing her off, and then Tyler is like receiving that energy and really having that beautiful life. And we get to see that. And that's really gratifying as an actor and an audience, I would imagine.
Yeah. And that brings me to a question I had for Donovan, which is you're negotiating, this character of Abby, who as an audience, we start the story out, we're really invested in Abby and Josh, and we think we're watching one story, and then it shifts. But then you keep coming back as Emma, as Abby, and it's a very tricky thing, I think. And if you can share a little bit about working on that and negotiating that sort of relationship.
Yeah, I think the first time I read this play, I just remember weeping, just because it, like you said, it was not the play that I thought it was going to be at all. So in that scene, when Tyler says, we never met, and Abby responds, oh, I just tears. And I think what was so wild about this experience with Inishnuwa in particular is, as actors, we have been doing various things since quarantine has begun. And I think Inishnuwa is the first one that has had kind of a sense of tech elements, right? So we were recording with our cameras and we had lighting and all these things. And I hadn't had that benefit in previous productions I've done. So I think when I was actually filming this, for all of us, as we were filming this, we had, a separate camera. So right now I can see my scene partners, right? But when we were filming, I cannot see them. I literally cannot visually connect with them. So that was so new for me as an actor. And I think it's such a testament to the words that Daf has created. And it's a testament to the actors that I was working with for really being amazing voice actors, because the fact that, I cannot see them and I'm playing this character who just, this goes on this wild emotional trajectory from beginning to end, and I'm still able to feel connected and to feel affected by the things that I'm hearing is just, it's really, really special, I think.
I have to agree with Don.
I think that's something. No, go for it.
Oh, I was just saying, I really have to agree with Donovan on when the first time I read the script, like there were multiple points where I stopped reading and I was like, Travoy, just say yes. Like you could stop right here, right now, not finishing the script and do this project. But then I was like, no, Travoy, be a good actor, finish the script. But there were like three solid points. There were like three solid points where I was just like, say yes, man, just say it. It was so beautiful.
Oh, I definitely agree. And I think that is something that, again, people don't always realize in this strange new format we're living in, right? That you aren't watching each other over Zoom you are just sort of hearing each other, which exactly what Travoy and Allison had mentioned earlier, right? Or all three of you, that the text becomes like that much bigger, that much more important, because it's your lifeline, isn't it? It's all you got. Yeah, I did want to share that there was a comment from a viewer that said, very strong performance, thoughtful play. Thank you. So I wanted to pass that along. It's not just me saying it, it's other people. So we're nearing an hour, so I do want to wrap this up. But I think one of the things I've been asking everyone on these different talkbacks is, I think the mentality I know that I often have is, unfortunately, we can't be in a space together. We are forced to be doing this in a virtual format. But I think part of the conversation we found today is that there are actually some benefits to it, right? We are finding positives in it. We are finding new ways to take plays and structure them and understand them. So just a general question for everyone of like, were there things in this process or about working on this play or shifting to a virtual format that surprised you and were unexpected given the circumstances of the world we're in right now?
I don't know. I don't know about the unexpected. I would say that for me, the positive, the wonderfulness that came out of this experience was, one, getting to reconnect with my friend CJ, who I haven't really gotten to see since pandemic world hit, and who I think about a lot. And so it was just nice to have CJ and we had an overlap at Villanova University together. We both worked in the costume shop together. And so it was just wonderful to reconnect with him, but to reconnect with him on a professional level, which was also really exciting. And then the second piece was to also get to reconnect with Travoy, who I had gotten to work with in person on the production of Rachel last year at Quintessence. And so that was just super exciting too, to be able to reconnect with him, even though it was this virtual world. And then to get to work with Allison and Donovan, two actors whom I've been wanting to work with, whose work I've enjoyed watching. And so to have that opportunity, I'm grateful that we have this virtual world in which I can do that. And that, it's not like we can't get together and put on a show. It's just a little different than maybe how I would have originally intended.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, Megan. Anyone else?
I get to come to the States without having to pay for a flight. It's brilliant.
I know. You get to hang out with those Americans.
I wouldn't have. I mean, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have had this experience. I don't know. I mean, you would have done a reading. I'm not sure. I wouldn't have really. I'm not sure if I would have even seen it, let alone kind of get to engage and hear these really fascinating insights. It's been especially what CJ's been saying about adoption in the States, or just it's fascinating to hear all the I always love process and what people's process has been and how people relate to text in different ways, and it's always different. And it's as a writer, it's you're constantly learning by every production, and this is a production. It's a different type of production, but and I've had a much more intimate experience of it than I would have had otherwise. So I'm really grateful for that. So thank you.
Yeah, that's completely true. I mean, in a standard year, we would have done a reading and that would have been like in a theater, and we would have talked about the play without you there, and then we would have maybe sent an email saying it went well, and that would be kind of it. That's really true. And I think it is a perk in a time where it feels like there's not a lot of those. So we're really glad you're able to join and engage with this reading. Anyone else?
I'll chime in. I think so. The world of theater, I remember ever since I was an undergrad, it was like, this is theater. You got to be nice to people because theater is a really small world, and if you're mean, it's gonna come back around. And being in Philly and meeting people who work on this and that, and this person, that person, It's like, oh yeah, the world of theater is really, really small. But this experience and doing it the way it's done, and making now connections with Daph and reconnecting with Megan, it's the world is a lot smaller than I think it is. Like you have adopted parent, adopted child, and birth parent, stars in line to come to this from different parts of the world, different parts of the planet, to somehow find their way into helping bring these stories to life. So I often, and it's probably because it's election season, so that always makes me feel a little othered and less than and alone and like I don't matter. So with this production and the way it is, it's a reminder of like, there's not only people who see me in Philly or in other parts of the country. There are bonds and connections of people who know my experience and know my story throughout the entire planet. So it may feel like I'm alone, but these stories are out there and they're connected, and none of us exist alone in our stories. There's other people that exist in them in different ways. So this experience just really helped to highlight and show me. And just like Travoy said, I could have said yes. Maybe I got an email from Dr. Phillips in Villanova. I could have said yes right then. I said, oh, let me see what it is. Oh, Claire wants me. I could have said yes then. I really could have said yes when it said Megan it was involved. And as I read the play, and I read the play, is this a play about adoption? I was like, all right, yes. I didn't even get finished with the whole entire thing. I saw what it was about. I saw the name, I saw Inishnua, and said, yeah, I want to be involved because of the intimacy of theater. In some way feels like we're taking it out of it by doing it this way. But Megan, I think, did a great job of doing the best he could to engage with the audience. But the themes are spread out, and it feels like the house is no longer just whatever the space is and the audience there. It now becomes the entire planet. Whoever can click the link now shares in this experience together. So I think that's a huge plus that I take going forward of being able to, because we know we could spread messages throughout the world. We've known for a long time now. We've had the internet, we could use things, but it feels like now when we got forced into it with the pandemic, we're forced to just play with this internet toy. All right, well now just figure out what we can do with it and really make theater as it can be again. And we're still in the early stages, but yeah, I think at the end of the pandemic, when things go back to quote unquote normal, when I say that, meaning like I don't want to go back to what it used to be. I hope it's better than it was when it started. But I think we just take the advantages of it and put it in live time. Like, oh, so the playwright can always be there. We just zoom them in from zoom them in.
We didn't realize.
Yeah, I know. I didn't think of it. So I can still come to rehearsal even if I have a thing at a state away in some capacity. So yeah, it's tough at times with things the way they are, but I'm really trying to lean into all the beauty that this provides me, and I thank everyone here again for allowing me to have that.
Thanks, CJ. I think that's a lovely note to end on. Yeah, I think there's a level of connection and community we're still able to find and explore in different ways. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our audience who we can't see, but we know are present. I really appreciate all of you, giving up part of your Sunday afternoon and or evening, depending where you are, to be a part of this. And there's been a few more comments coming in from folks just saying how much they loved the play, how much they loved the performances, and just really positive responses. So I want to share that with you all. So thank you all so much. And I hope we will have a chance to meet again soon.
Thank you,
Take
Claire.
care. Bye.